Welcome to Balanced Life with Debbie Carlin Boyle. Conversations connecting to a healthier you. The show that gives you all the latest and greatest health and wellness information to inspire you to live a life of balance and joy. Debbie Carlin Boyle is a health and nutrition coach, personal trainer, and fitness instructor who helps her clients live in balance with everything that feeds us, in addition to the food on our plate. Please welcome your host, Debbie Carlin Boyle.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome. It's a beautiful summer day here in sunny downtown Burbank, California. And I welcome you to my show. It is Balanced Life with me, Debbie Carlin Boyle. We're conversations that connect to a healthier you. And we want you to get involved with the show today. So, because I like to have everybody be interactive. So to do that, you can call in. And the number here is 323-843-2826. So anytime during the show, if you feel compelled to ask a question or make a comment of me or my guest, please do so. If you'd rather, go to my Facebook page, which is Fit by Design, also known as Balanced Life by Debbie. It is streaming, our show is streaming live there right now, and you can make a comment, and myself or my guest will get back to you. So, all that being said, I have a great guest for you today, and Dr. Stephan Poulter is a renowned licensed clinical psychiatrist psychologist in private practice here in West Los Angeles, California. He has been providing professional mental health services to clients for well over 35 years. Dr. Poulter is a public speaker on parenting, adolescent, and spiritual psychological issues, and he is also the author of 7 books, which include Your X Factor, The Mother Factor, Father Your Son, The Father Factor, The Art of Successful Failure, and his latest release, The Shame Factor. Today, we will learn how to heal your deepest fears and set yourself free of the emotional boundaries known as shame. Will you please welcome back to my show, my amazing guest and my friend, Dr. Stephan Poulter.
Thank you, Debbie.
Hi, Stephan.
It's great to be here again.
Otherwise known as Dr. P in the world of us who are your clients or patients, which in full transparency, I can tell you that I am. And he's helped me through some really tough times. And I found you initially through your book, Your X Factor.
Correct.
And it was very enlightening to me. I looked at the back and said, Brentwood, California. I live in California. I live close to Brentwood. I'm calling that man. And I did. And you helped me immensely to stay in my lane, as you would say, during a very difficult time in my life. And I can't have enough gratitude or tell you how much I appreciate that. So subsequently, moving forward, Del and I started a show, Del and Debbie's Mind, Body, Soul. Mm-hmm. And in full disclosure, you've been on our show 5 times. Because every time you had a book, we had you on. Well, you had some books that were already out. Father Your Son was the one. Well, we kind of talked about that with the Father Factor.
Correct.
But this is your 6th appearance with me.
Yes.
And
it's fabulous.
I appreciate this immensely. This book, Your Shame Factor, The Shame Factor, you did a talk on recently here locally in LA at the Mystic Bookstore, and I was able to attend that. And you went through chapters very, very eloquently, I should say, to help the audience understand what role shame plays in our life. And we're going to get to that. But before we do, I want to talk about you a little bit for those who haven't had the opportunity to learn a little bit about your background and know, how you sit in this seat today and how you've written all these books that you've written. So tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got here. Threw you on that one, huh?
Okay, great.
Because you figured you've already been here. You've already done that, but
that's okay.
I assume that every time new audiences, I'm going to have to. I want them to know a little bit about you.
It's interesting. When I wrote 7 books, and I say in the introduction in the book that I grew up thinking I wasn't smart. I had a reading problem, 1st grade through 6th grade, and it was torture. It just didn't come together.
And you said you wore glasses. I read the
Yes.
first. I read that's in your first
Yes.
chapter. Yeah,
Yeah, when
and
glasses
you got
were not-
made fun of.
Right, glasses were not popular then. And by the time I got to about the 7th grade, my mom, as I said, got me a subscription to Sports Illustrated. And that was the end of it. I read it cover to cover. I knew it. And one day I could read.
Yeah.
And I find the writing just evolving over the years. It's about getting information out there because these issues are seminal, meaning our relationship with our dad, our mother, how to overcome heartbreak in romance. But the shame factor is different. Shame factor is going further down the road, saying we all struggle with it to a greater or lesser degree. And it comes out in many different ways, such as I don't feel good about myself. I can't do that. I'm afraid they're going to reject me.
You allow people to objectify you and criticize you, and you believe it, you take it, you sit back and observe and don't, which we're going to get into all the different types, the 7 different types of shame and how they manifest.
Right.
But you were a police officer. You're like, why is she getting into that? But you were a
Yes, I
police
was.
officer for a while. And
that was a great education.
Yeah.
It grew me up.
Yeah.
And I look back on those days. It was difficult. I felt like I was pushing a boat on the sand.
I love your analogies.
Yeah,
They're always the best.
It was a long beach to get to the water. But it was a very interesting time because a lot of this stuff got planted. I'd see fatherless boys. I'd see domestic violence. I'd see what happens when men don't manage their rage, anger becomes toxic, and when women don't, how it becomes toxic to them. All these things are happening between the ages of 23 and 31. Made quite an imprint on me.
And when things come to a head as an officer, that's when you're called in, and you can see. So making that imprint on you, did you ever think that you would be studying psychology and trying to get behind what's going on, trying to get to the beginnings of why this is going on, and helping people that way?
As I say to my clients, getting through the decade of your 20s is the hardest decade. It really is, because you're not sure which ends up, what's north, what's south, what's east or west.
True.
And through all that, I always wanted to work with people. I wasn't really interested in finance because I can make a lot of money, but I was interested in doing something different, more humanitarian. And I believe in this life that was my passion. I first thought about being a forest ranger. And this was back in the late 70s when they weren't hiring forest rangers. So kind of threw that idea out. And when I was graduating from college, this guy came on campus, this police captain. It was like a Tom Berenger July 4th movie with Tom Cruise. And he says, you guys will make a difference in the city? Join the police department.
So
do something different.
Resonate.
I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah.
And once I started doing, I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? This is way beyond me.
Yeah.
It took me 2 years to catch up to that game. Like they talk about it. It took me 2 years before I felt like I could catch up to the speed of the job.
And feel like that this was, but you always had that feeling that I could do better helping people than getting here after the fact.
I would say
because it's already escalated by the time you're there.
Better. It's interesting because I used to think after we left, what are these people going to do?
Yeah. Who's going to help them?
Right.
Change.
Like, okay, so we clean up the murder scene. They wash it down the street, but who's going to deal with the emotional wreckage?
Yeah.
That was always a thought.
Interesting.
I used to think, so after we leave and the fire department leaves and the paramedics take the person away.
Who really picks up the pieces? The
that
emotional
always
pieces.
intrigued me.
Yeah. And so then that shifted gears for you to go
Right.
ahead and get into psychology and helping people really be preventative if you can.
Proactive.
Yeah.
Proactive, stay
Yeah.
in front of the wave.
Yeah.
And so I always thought it was interesting. The first day on the job, I think I've told you, it's working swing shift 3 to 11, and we get a call, 911, shots fired, husband and wife fight. Turned out to be a boyfriend, girlfriend. Her boyfriend came home from work and was in a bad mood again, and this was the last time he was ever going to push her around. And she shot him in the eye, it went out the back of his head.
Lovely.
I had never seen anything like that.
I'm
And
sure.
My partner looked at me and goes, welcome to the NFL. And I'm
Whoa.
like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
And I remember
It's your initiation.
I remember thinking, what is she going to do with this? I used to think that all the time. And my partners would say, what are you thinking? Like, how is she going to handle it?
Yeah, the rest of her life.
And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you do with this? How do you come home realizing there was a murder in your living room?
Right.
But that's...
That you're responsible for.
Right, or you're a part of.
Yeah.
And so that drove me to get into psychology. It made sense to me.
So, see, and that's the reason why I wanted you to tell your story.
Okay.
Because now it all falls into place, why you've written these 7 books and what you've seen in your practice and what you know and what you've studied and what you've learned through because most of your books have your patient stories in there, your client stories. And
they're a composite of people.
Right.
The themes are universal.
Right, exactly.
The themes are universal.
These stories are universal, right, exactly, which compels you to write books that zero in on each of these situations and common themes.
And I find shame. People come to therapy and they want to feel better.
Right.
It doesn't matter what my degree or titles after my name is. Do people feel better? And I found, like 30 years ago, the whole idea about shame.
Really plays a big part. It's sort of a huge umbrella over us. So let's start with that. What is shame?
What is shame? I always start off with what shame isn't.
Okay.
It's not guilt.
Okay. So what's the difference between guilt and
Guilt
shame?
is an action.
Okay.
Like, I cut off somebody on the road, or I got out of something, or I didn't pay for something. Guilt is always related to an action.
Right.
Shame is a feeling. It's intrinsic inside of you.
That you can't just
You can't
blow
wash
away.
it off.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't.
Good works may assuage it for a while, but ultimately it's a deep sense of feeling inadequate.
And that comes building up over a period of time. That's
yes.
not like guilt is more about the
Situational.
It's situational and very almost impulsive.
Right.
Yeah.
Where guilt is, I should have tipped that person more. I feel bad I yelled at somebody. That's guilt.
Right.
It's a definite A plus B equals C.
Right.
Action, boundaries, consequences.
Right. In the moment.
Right. Where shame is much more insidious, much more it's
Build
like
up.
Jell-O. It's inside of you. It's hard to get. And people tend to build their life around it
Yeah.
to keep it away.
So they ignore thus the shame factor.
Sure.
But shame comes in so many different forms because we're all raised different ways and we all absorb how our shame is going to play out differently based on what our childhood is and what our perception of how we're being treated is, like you were saying earlier about yourself.
Right.
So, so tell us, what are there?
What shame is essentially is this pervasive sense of not feeling good enough. And I use different words as never enough, feeling like damaged goods. It's your fault. It's my responsibility. And there's a deep sense of feeling defective. Mm-hmm. Now, it can translate into anxiety or depression or all these other psychological symptoms. But I believe shame in and of itself is its own diagnosis.
Right. And we're going to get into
that more.
The way it does manifest and play out and how we can treat it to get out of that cycle of shame. Because you have you talk about the 7 common emotional triggers of shame.
A lot of people think, I don't really have any shame. But they have a horrendous fear of embarrassment or fear of being seen.
Right. I was going to ask you that because embarrassment is always something, again, that's more situational, I would say. Like, oh my God, my pants just tore in the crotch or something. And now you're embarrassed. So
this is a little different.
Yeah. Okay.
This is much more about you want to hide from life. Mm-hmm. You don't want to be seen.
Right.
Like I have a lot of women.
On a grand scale.
Right.
Yeah.
I have women in my practice right now. They want to elope because they don't want to be the center of attention at their wedding.
Oh,
they don't want to be seen.
I've known people like that. Yeah.
Right. They don't want to be seen.
Yeah.
And because deep down.
So are they both have shame in their lives?
Right.
Separately.
That
have come together.
And it comes out as fear of being seen. It's like an emotional paralysis of being seen or people are going to notice you. And it's many times it's like, I want to hide from life. I want to stay in the background because I don't want to feel this uncomfortableness I have
right.
about myself.
And that goes
life.
back to the age-old overcoming our fears of what people might think.
Right.
Or how judgment, or how am I going to be perceived?
See, and that gets into intimacy, because that, what you just touched on, is codependence. Because your opinion of me is more important than mine.
Absolutely. Most people operate that way, correct?
Well,
but they shouldn't.
Correct.
Yes.
That's why people talk about the divorce rate's high. Divorce rate's not high. The shame rate's high.
Yes.
And if shame is high in your life, intimacy and shame don't mix. Never blend. They're not going oil and water. They repel each other. Oil and vinegar, they don't mix.
Right, and we're going to get into how they don't mix, because you have a whole chapter on that.
Yes, I do.
So so the feeling of anger and powerlessness that you have.
And anger is a secondary emotion. The primary emotion is shame. Is I feel invisible or I feel defective. And it comes out with men. They tend to externalize it on the world. Like Stephen Poulter.
Oh, right. There, go and shoot people.
Right, Mandalay Bay, where, I mean, by the grace of God, his gun melted.
Yes. And
otherwise, there have been, who knows, maybe thousands of people.
Right.
And it's shame, because shame is always self-hatred at the end of the day. Shame leads to self-hatred. That's the dead-end street. It takes you down. And he commits suicide.
Right.
There was 58 deaths, and 59, he was the last one.
So...
And
why?
Let me throw this out about women.
Yeah, okay.
Women turn it inwards.
Yeah, and more of an emotional, and they get destructive too.
Correct.
With medicating or
body dysmorphia,
eating disorders. Yep.
Women internalize it. Men externalize it. Neither's good.
No.
Neither's good.
Neither's not dealing with the shame that has been building up their entire lives.
And after a while, people think, well, this is just who I am. I'm like, no, it's not. And that leads into the imposter syndrome, where the Wall Street Journal did a big article about that in business. How on Wall Street, how many people are afraid they're going to be seen as being inadequate or not competent. Has nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that it's not their job. It's who they feel about themselves.
Right.
And it comes out in their job. That's the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, where they're playing a part almost. Yep.
And they, it's like a glass ceiling. Many people feel like I have this glass ceiling in my life. It's the shame ceiling. It's like there's a glass wall between you and the next step.
Right. And you can't move forward because you're almost paralyzed from the shame that you're like manifesting.
And you're going to be exposed.
Yes. And God forbid.
Right. And exposure and shame, they're like, we talk about the emotional terrorist inside of us. Like the hunter.
I love that phrase.
Emotional terrorist.
Yeah.
Because he's hunting us, or she's hunting you.
Yeah.
Mine's hunting me.
We're our own worst enemy.
Right. And that's where that term comes from. Because the imposter syndrome is I'm fooling everybody that I'm good enough. No, you're not. You are competent.
Right.
Now perfection is a form of shame. Trying to be perfect is a form of shame. Making mistakes and learning.
Fear of failure, or fear of judgment that you're not good enough at something, so you're going to work really hard to be perfect, which there's no such thing.
No such thing.
Yeah.
But that breeds shame. And the imposter syndrome, boom, it's up.
Yeah.
It's like you have to wear a costume when you go to work.
Yeah, makes sense.
Emotionally.
Yeah.
The other one is interesting, is isolation. People tend to isolate because they can't tolerate the feelings of ever thinking they're not good enough.
Right.
So they much rather stay on the periphery of life, not be in relationships, the work.
Oh, we have a phone call.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. But you can look at me.
I'm sorry.
They're not going to pop up.
Oh, hey, how are you?
Okay.
We always like phone calls.
Hi, caller. Are you there? Hello.
Hello.
Hi. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Okay. My first name is Sona, and I'm calling from Montreal.
Oh, hi, Sonia. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Are you listening to the show with Dr. Stephan Poulter?
Well, actually, I just dialed and I wasn't sure. I was like, can you please remind me of the topic?
Yes. So we're talking about his new book called The Shame Factor. And we're talking about how shame enters your life and what form it takes and how to deal with it.
Okay. So I don't think I was following, but definitely it's a topic that I can share my part of shame.
Okay, do.
The way definitely, yeah. Actually, I'm 54 years old, and I come from a culture where if you don't respect certain rules, you are considered as they will actually outcast you even if you don't follow the rules. I can give you one example. I'm born and raised in Lebanon, and then we moved to Canada when I was 21. So I decided to leave home when I was 22 and live by myself. So as my parents, they come from a culture where this is seen as bad, especially when they go to the church. People will talk about it, that the daughter left the house. So, and they come from not very good, proper parenting. They are not the parents that are equipped well to educate to be there emotionally to their children, my parents. So what they did, they decided to not to talk to me for so many years. And because they were kind of ashamed of it. This is not the proper way of feeling shame. So personally myself, for so many years, I was hiding. I wasn't going to all these cultural places.
We were just talking about this.
Right.
This is
afraid of being seen by people who contact my parents, and they will they will kind of give me dirty looks, and I was ashamed of that.
Yes.
And
Wow.
that affected my entire life, and it added to my health and
big time. I understand that. So Dr. Poulter's going to address that right now.
Well, it was funny, you said it very well, that the shame about feeling culturally that there's something wrong with you, even though what you did in many cultures is considered mental health. And that's the tricky part of shame, is how can you be
How do
own,
you survive? Right?
your true self
Yes.
in a situation like that. And ultimately, you have to do what's inside of your heart, because it takes a lot of courage to do that, to leave home and be independent. Because if you didn't do that, you would have probably become very, very unhappy, and all the issues.
Depressed.
Right, and all the issues that go with that. So that's a very courageous move to separate from the family. We call that separation and individuation process. And many people never do it. You know, they talk about failure to launch, guys that stay home forever, daughters that never leave their mom or their father. It's because of this issue, that if you leave the family, you're bad.
Right.
And that's where shame comes in. Because you're not bad. It's part of your natural process.
Yes, and I find that for the word shame, for each culture, it means something different.
It's interesting. I think it plays out differently, but I think the bottom line, the numerator is different, but underneath, Sonia, the feeling is common. The fact that you don't feel good enough about yourself and you're doing something wrong, that unfortunately is very universal.
Sonia, have you been able, because you recognize it very well, you were very articulate about what it was and identifying shame in your life, and saying that it did take, an emotional and physical toll on you. How have you dealt with it? I'm curious. What steps have you taken to know that this is not something that you should absorb this deeply? And what have you done to help yourself?
I could say both fortunately and unfortunately. The fortunately is because some people, they will never realize what's happening and they will suffer their entire life. In my case, I would say the shame was not the only issue. Is again, we had the narcissistic parents, and the dynamic was very unhealthy dynamic, and that's one of the reasons I decided to leave the house. And what I did, I kept myself so busy because I was the scapegoat. So I had 2 jobs and went to university at night. So for 10, 15 years, I didn't have time to think about it. At one point, I kind of couldn't take it anymore, and I got literally sick. Then I had time in my hands, I was at home, I was on sick leave. Then I had time in my hand to think about it and realize what was happening really inside of me, and that it wasn't my fault. And I did a lot of work. I could say for 10 years I've been reading books and trying to get all kinds of help to realize what was happening.
That's excellent. That is excellent. You're helping a lot of people by calling in today, because it says there
Very
is
relevant.
help out there, because this is a big this is a big story that you have, because that shame has followed you this far, and that you actually recognized it and got help for it. Any suggestions for Sonia at this point?
I think, Sonia, I think it's great that you took time.
Yes.
It's interesting that shame always has a way of, you can push it down and be as busy as possible, but the hunter is always hunting you. And one day it catches up, and then you have to reconcile with it. And people go, what's self-love, what's self-acceptance? Is exposing the uncomfortableness to yourself about being different, about the separating from your family when they said you can't leave, because if you leave, you're a traitor.
Right.
Or you've abandoned us. That, once that's exposed to them like you've done, you'll find a lot of relief. And that shame doesn't have power. Shame can never function once it's been exposed.
Oh, good.
Once you open the closet door, it's been dark for 1,000 years, and the light's in there, it's as if the light's always been on.
Wow.
And I guess shame and guilt, they go hand in hand together.
Yeah, they don't help each other.
They don't help each other.
No, they feed
And
off each other.
I would just like to make a point how I realized that I had this shame in me. And each time I was going to a grocery store, and because I live in the same neighborhood as my siblings and my parents, so each time, for so many years, I still have that little feeling when I go to the grocery store that, someone from my culture will see me. So I always try to kind of walk in a different aisle when I see someone from my culture, because I was felt and bombarded that, what I did was a shame to the family. And also, I guess, they made me feel that shame so hard that I still have that little voice and feeling when I still go to the grocery store. But then I keep reminding myself that, why should I feel bad about it? If they have an issue about what I did, it's their issue, not my issue.
Right.
I did nothing wrong.
And that's addressing it head on, and that is really, very commendable of you to do that, because that's your health, emotional, mental, physical.
Well, Sonia, thank you.
But it took a lot of time, unfortunately.
It does.
And, it took me my entire, almost my entire life.
Well,
it's ongoing.
I would suggest, that it is. I think everything is ongoing, and we're always evolving, and we're always working on things within us, and internal and external. So I'm going to recommend that you pick up this book. It's Dr. Stephan Poulter, The Shame Factor. And keep listening, ubngo.com right now, because we're going through a lot of the chapters, and I would recommend, I think this will keep you in the ongoing and on this health path that you're on right now, and in making yourself better. And I want to thank you for calling in today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You know,
Well, that was good timing.
Very good. She said a lot of good things. One thing she said was, these people made me feel bad. No one makes you feel bad.
Except yourself.
Right. But that's shame. Shame has it believe that they control you.
Right.
Their opinion controls you.
Right. And that just comes from how shame reared its head in your childhood.
Right. And the belief that goes with it.
Yes, exactly. It stays with you.
Right.
And then, because we were talking about, before Sonia called, we were talking about the not good enough, or not feeling that you're not good enough. That kind of stuff really comes from your childhood, and most likely, and I remember this the last time we've talked about the book, parenting. I mean, it's so important as parents that we are aware that we don't instill these different types of ways that shame can creep into our children's life by the way we handle them, situations, the way we talk to them, the way we talk to our other parent, our parents, whatever, they're paying attention to everything.
And it's also, Debbie, it sounds odd, but how we talk to ourselves.
Right.
Kids know how we feel about ourselves.
Right, but are we like, I remember as a kid, I really didn't think internally. Everything was so fleeting. All my thoughts were so fleeting. Those thousands and thousands of thoughts a day. I never could put, like, all I did was absorb what was being said to me, that if I wasn't enough about something. My father used to get very angry at me because he would tutor me in math when I was in junior high, when math started to get very difficult for me. I'm not a math end of it. And and he was a mathematical genius. So he expected that of me. So right away, I wasn't enough.
Right.
And that, I mean, to the point where he was red in the face and ready to punch, and he wouldn't punch me, but I could see him. And that never left me, but I never put a thought to it, but it played out later in my adult life.
But you absorbed it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's what kids do.
It's
they absorb, but we can't, at the time, I guess is what I'm asking, as a child, we're absorbing, but we can't really curtail it. We can't really learn to deal that early, can we?
Well,
so it's more the parents.
Exactly. But let's go forward. Okay. Because as adults with small children, the more we deal with our internal dis-ease, our kids benefit. We know that.
Because we fix it. We're working on ourselves.
We're healing ourselves.
Yeah.
Because the continuum of parenting goes from your child feels very competent to all we over here feels very defective. And how we talk to our kids sets the tempo for that.
Absolutely.
And that is something, Dr. Spock in his famous book with parenting, that's what he talks about. And Dr. Dorothy Briggs in Your Child's Self-Esteem, that is the premise of her book, which sold I think 100 million copies.
Right.
Your Child's Self-Esteem. And she talks about shame in the late 50s, early 60s, when everybody's like, what's that?
Taboo. Nobody talks about shame then.
Antibiotics.
Certain things were expected. You just do what you're
told.
You don't have a lot of freedom of speech within the family or out of it, But we were getting back to the common functions, and then I want to spend a good amount of time because we're going to talk about intimate relationships and shame and how they play out in, because those things are very important in our lives. Starting from the moment we have our first relationship, and we don't want to keep making those same mistakes over and over again. So if we identify where we play, who we are in that shame factor.
Generally, one of the 7 plays out, and we were talking about embarrassment. It could be seen, or the second one is the anger. Always, like people talk about, anger management. We're really a shame management. The imposter syndrome plays out in the workplace more, where you feel like a fraud professionally.
Right.
Coworkers are going to see you. There's a glass ceiling, and there's always this impending doom when someone's upset with you at work.
Right.
And Sunday's the worst day of the week for you.
Right.
Because, oh my God, I got to go back to work, and they're going to find out.
Right. This panic of what this week is going to be like, and then my veil will be off again. And
the fourth element I talk about is the fear of isolation. And what that is, isolation, you can't tolerate the feelings of feeling inadequate, and the idea of rejection, the myth of rejection. Because I know when I was writing the book, the publisher didn't understand what I meant. I said, there's no such thing as rejection. We have to buy into it. We have to buy into it when someone doesn't like us.
I see it
all the
in
time.
Every stage of life. Rejection. I have friends, I have a lot of friends, we're here in Hollywood, and I have a lot of friends in the movie industry, and they're either actors, editors, directors, cinematographers, and they go out, they're perfectly qualified for the job that they're, applying for, or the job interview that they're going on, and they don't get it over and over and over again, to a point where they take it very personally, and it puts them into a very dark place. And I know everybody, depending on what their background is, it's going to play out differently. But how does somebody, I know it's not you, but how do you overcome rejection and pick yourself up, stand up straight, dust yourself off, and really not be the imposter and go forward?
The word comes to mind is when we lose our perspective. There's the thing about being caught in grid traffic, stop and go traffic, versus being at 10,000 feet and looking down at the traffic. Two different experiences, same traffic.
Right.
Same traffic jam, the gridlock. And many times when people find that they don't get the job they wanted, or they don't get the promotion they wanted, they get stuck in the gridlock, the emotional gridlock, where you go to 10,000 feet.
Enough.
Yeah, you go to 10,000 feet. It's a lot bigger than just one street. There's more. It's a bigger picture. Perspective is how you help deal with that.
Okay. And yes.
A wider perspective.
Right. It's easier to say than do. Let's
Correct.
be, and I know that's where people in your profession come in really handy, because it's so big. It's so in your face, rejection.
Well, disappointment. People always say rejection. I always go to disappointment. Disappointment is more debilitating, because the expectation is I'm good enough.
Right. And then
it doesn't happen.
Told you're not.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the disappointment
Right.
can stay for a lifetime if it's not addressed.
Right. And you do have to address it.
Right.
And so that plays out also in feeling like you're not good enough, and rejection in intimate relationships and our personal relationships with our significant others. Right. Let's talk about that.
Fear of intimacy. Feeling like damaged goods, not good enough, feeling defective, tend to be emotionally guarded, defensive, less than. These are all common feelings. And intimacy and shame don't mix, as I was saying. Shame is emotional cancer. And as a 14-year-old asked me the other day.
Another good phrase, may I say.
Said, what does that mean? Is that shame will eat away at the fabric of the relationship with yourself and your significant other.
Right. And how does it play out? There's different ways it plays out. Like, you have different terms for different ways that shame comes into a relationship.
Yeah, I talk about, like I was talking about, where it comes in amnesia, denial, and avoidance. Amnesia, I don't remember what happened, and even though they're behaving this way. Or denial, that didn't happen. And their intimacy, things they do, they're in denial about why they're doing it and what they're doing. And thirdly, avoidance, never really revealing what they're really feeling. And
you have in your chapter in your book on relationships and intimacy. Funny enough, you talk about a story, and the name you use is Debbie. I know you weren't talking about me because it wasn't my story, but you were talking about that she was engaged, and her fiance she was just avoiding everything that she should have been dealing with, because he was really treating her very awful. It wasn't somebody that she belonged with, but she was being very passive and not avoiding the issues that were at hand. And as a result, he was trying to step all over her. And you were helping her see it in a different perspective, in a different way, so she could get over the avoidance that she had shame built around, obviously. And
the denial and amnesia.
Right.
Now, people, they get avoidance, they get denial. But amnesia, that's a tricky one, because I have no memory of how bad it is.
Right.
Or why I allow it to be so bad.
Right.
There's like no save button.
Right.
It's like you're working on your laptop, you turn it off, it's all gone.
And so is it just because it's familiar that you let it keep happening?
Right, because there's a reason why, because underneath that is something. In that vignette and the story about Debbie, the fact is she didn't think she was good enough and that she could ever get married. So
she just let whoever wanted to marry her.
Right, she thought he was the best option she had. And it got so extreme, she couldn't do it. She could not rationalize it.
Right. When he came up with a prenup, she was the one making the money, and he came up with the prenup that was so irrational. It was like, really? You have to be hit over the head to be told you need to walk away from this?
He did her a favor. Now, I have a lot of clients that deal with prenups, And many times it is a breaking point, not because of the issue of money or real property. It's the issue of the relationship so skewed. And then now you're putting it in writing. Mm-hmm. I find that. Now, there are other prenups which are just not a problem. But I have found many times it's part of the whole dysfunction and the shame of intimacy.
Interesting. So how does one work on when you identify that shame from that has been brewing all these years is playing out in your personal relationship, in intimacy, in sex? What do we do to work on that, overcome it? Because we want that deep connection
Let's remember the triangle.
To have.
Amnesia, denial, and avoidance.
Okay.
That
so those
triangle
have to be.
Right. The opposite of amnesia is being present.
Okay.
The opposite of denial is acceptance. And the opposite end of avoidance is approach behavior. When you're present, emotionally present, starting to feel the discomfort, and you're accepting this is what it is, not what I hope he or she'll be, and you approach the issue, shame can't
rear its ugly head.
Again, the closet door's open.
Right.
Light's coming in.
Okay.
Yeah, those three elements, because amnesia, denial, and avoidance are the big three. That keeps it in place.
Okay.
It's like with cancer, you need certain elements where the immune system's compromised, the white blood cell is compromised, and there's the rebellion. Shame is rebellion against you.
All right.
Shame rebels against your emotional health and well-being.
It doesn't want you to be happy.
Correct.
And that's where we have to start doing the work on ourselves.
Right. And I don't want to make this sound like, oh my God, this is unbelievable, terrible.
Yeah, like there's no hope.
Yeah.
We're all going to live with this within this triangle in some degree.
The idea is to reduce amnesia by being more present.
Okay.
Staying present. In like the book, The Power of Now. I mean, Eckhart Tolle, that's brilliant because if you're present, good stuff happens.
Right.
Because you can't be in denial.
Right.
And you're approaching issues. You're not avoiding them.
Right.
You're not driving 100 miles around the block to avoid this prenup that pretty much leaves you in a terrible position in a relationship.
And it will make things so much worse.
The other piece of intimacy and shame is that shame will always create issues outside of the person. Like there'll be blaming, there's a lack of commitment, there's financial problems, but it's always about something else other than them.
Right.
It keeps the attention off them.
So, so another way it rears its head. So so that's basically putting blame somewhere else other than getting back to dealing with the issues that you have to deal with. Yeah.
Amnesia, denial, and avoidance. If that means I tar and feather my partner, so be it, or blame her.
Yeah. No, so I was in a marriage like that. Mm-hmm. So as you know, which is what you've helped me through, stay in my lane.
Stay in your lane.
I said that. Be on your side of the real estate.
Yeah,
this is your real estate. This is the other real estate. You go over there, you're going right back, and you're going to let that. That's going to that's definitely going to tarnish you. It's going to make you sick, by staying in that lane. But it's so easy to do, when somebody moves and goes outside of themselves to blame you for everything that's going wrong in their life or your life together.
Do you know, I always say to people, I wish that was true. Because if you're at fault for everything, then you can fix everything.
Right.
And we know that's not possible.
Right.
So therein lies the problem.
Right.
That's
good when you're couple counseling.
All the time.
Because people always go, it's his fault. Sure, it's her fault.
I always say, I wish that was true.
Yeah.
Because if it was,
it'd be easy
they
fix.
could fix it.
Yeah.
And now, the relationships are playing tennis. You're on your side of the court, he's on his side.
Right. Boom, back
Shame
and forth.
has you hit all the balls over the net, and you need to go over and hit him back.
Right.
Because if not, you're a bad partner.
So we basically, in our relationships, we need to be balanced, and our shame equally needs to be dealt with wherever that
comes out. Yep.
Yeah. And so do you think most people, in order to do that, well, I would say get your book, but do you think most people need outside help to be able to deal with how it's manifesting, to have that really deep, honest connection with somebody. So shame doesn't, I mean, in most of my short-term post-marriage relationships, shame has played out in one of these, ways where it hides itself. It's whether it was a money thing, a lack of commitment thing,
Right.
but which has kept me from making that connection to a deep connection with somebody long term, because there's shame in there.
Right.
And I'm not exempt,
Yeah, nor am I. Debbie, to answer your question, is it good to go to the doctor once a year medically? Yes.
Yeah. A tune-up.
Exactly. As is see a good psychologist, a therapist. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the reason why people are scared of it because they don't want to deal with the terrorists inside.
That's right. Or we don't want to deal. We don't want to admit. We don't want to avoid it. It's like doing taxes, you know? Let's just walk around, like you said, and we'll go around the long way. Yeah. And guess what? It just gets worse.
It does. Shame, it's emotional cancer. If you don't deal with cancer, it will ultimately consume your body.
That's right.
And unfortunately,
kill you. So people who don't realize they're living with shame, lastly, how do we, I know we're talking about it over and over in different ways, but we need to identify that where we sit in these different.
I think, Debbie, part of it is deep down, people know something's not working. And your comfort levels here, when your suffering exceeds this, things change. People do a lot to keep the suffering just below.
Right.
But once suffering exceeds comfort, change is in the air.
That's true.
That is the truth. And that's how people get there.
Okay. Lovely. I like that.
That's how people get there.
We are actually down to our last few minutes. So what I want to talk about is where people can actually see you in person, because you're going to be doing some book signings, right? That you have coming up.
Yeah, I don't have anything booked yet because it's the summer, but I will post them on my website when it comes up. And DrStephanPoulter.com, StephanPoulter.com.
Okay.
PHAN. And they can find it, or on the Shame Factor, they can just type in my name. It'll take them to my website also.
Oh, good. Okay.
And I'll have stuff there about doing stuff in the fall. I want to do some workshops.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Okay. How are those going to manifest? That you're going to do group workshops?
Yeah. No, I'm going to
in person or online?
Oh, in person.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
I think this is not. Eventually, I want to online. It's fine, but in the beginning, right now, I want to do this in person.
Okay.
Because we're talking about open heart surgery. It's not. I don't want my surgeon calling it in.
Yeah, I gotcha.
I don't need him 100 miles away.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice. So workshops with people. That's good. I mean, sign up for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then all your books that we mentioned at the top of the show, we can also people can access through Amazon.
Correct.
Or your website, DrStephanPoulter.com.
And I'll direct them to online bookstores.
Great.
And I appreciate that so much.
Love that.
Yes.
Now, final thoughts, words of wisdom that I always ask every guest to leave my audience with.
Shame is not guilt. Shame is emotional cancer, and cancer can be healed.
So seek out help.
Right. Shame is not terminal. It is if we avoid it.
Right.
And I've dealt with it. No one's exempt. In the East, they call it delusion or Maya, this stuff we all deal with. Or in Western, we call it sin, where we feel like we're defective, we're separated from ourselves. So it's all there. It's all within arm's reach.
It's so funny. I mean, it's not funny what you just said, but it's so funny because when you start dissecting how shame plays out in your life, as your book does, you start mentally picking people out. Oh, they're that. Oh my gosh, you really, your eyes open up. They really do. And that's why I can't recommend this book enough. It's called The Shame Factor by Dr. Stephan Poulter. It will really, you'll identify yourself, you'll identify others, and it will really help you through life because shame can really take us down. So if you want to come back up, take a look at this book, or if you know somebody who can use the help. And I want to thank you for your 6th appearance on my show. Every time, you write a book or we come up with a topic at interest, you are coming back because you are
it's my pleasure.
In-house guy. So I thank you so much.
You're the best, and I wish you all the best in your show and what you're doing. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. We're having fun. And I want to remind you that I'm a show that's the 2nd and 4th Tuesday of every month. I do 2 shows a month, not every Tuesday now at 2 o'clock. We're a 50-minute format, the 2nd and 4th Tuesday. I invite you to go to my YouTube channel, Balanced Life by Debbie, and there you can see all the archive shows that I've been doing since January. And you can also go to my Facebook page, Fit by Design, Balanced Life by Debbie, and my shows live on there too. So they're all great shows that can help you become so much more in touch with what's going on in your life and when it comes to health and wellness. So I'm going to leave you today and say thank you for joining us, and remember to keep connecting to a healthier you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Debbie. All right.